Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Freer. I'm the founder and CEO of Play Attention. I welcome you here, and it's just great to be with everyone today. I know that we've had a stressful couple of years, so now it's time to have a good time, learn to relax, and let's see what we can learn together today on cultivating positive behaviors in ADHD children and adults. I should tell you that my background is in education, and I started Play Attention nearly 30 years ago. It's now the #1 training program, neurocognitive training program for ADHD students and adults. I also work with automotive industry, and we've used the techniques that I'll talk about today with NASA, nuclear power operators, Olympic athletes, Da Vinci robotic surgeons, as well as ADHD students. So hopefully you can relax, turn your phone off, and let's learn a little bit and share a lot together today. We're talking about cultivating because this is the season of cultivation, isn't it? Spring, where we're cultivating, we're sowing seeds, we're planting our gardens, we're starting for a new promise of a new season that's going to be rich. And that's why we're talking about cultivating positive behaviors. But I do want to take a couple of quick polls for everyone here. So I want to know, what is your perception of negative behaviors exhibited by ADHD children or adults? Right? So first poll, are they just difficult to get along with? Is that just it? They're just difficult to get along with? Everyone here, can you raise your hand if you agree with that? Great. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Again, we'll talk about another poll. All right. How many of you feel that you may be the cause of the negative behavior? A hands up for that one too, please. Good. Okay. Now, is it a combination possibly of them having negative behaviors and my response? Is it a combination? Hands up for those people who think that may be it. Excellent. Well, by far, almost everyone here, there's the vast majority of us said, it's a combination. Let's find out what the real story is. I like that perception. Let's find out what the real story is. One of the things that I think we should really be particularly aware of, that is the foundation of this webinar today, is that improving sensitivity and responsiveness to the person we're caring for, whether it's as a teacher student, as a parent, as a spouse or a significant other, as one of my workers, a colleague. One of the things we need to be aware of is, and this is not just me talking, this is years and years of research done that say that if we can improve our sensitivity and responsiveness to these folks, we can improve behavioral outcomes. Ready with me on that? Listen to that very carefully, because I'm going to add one piece to it. We improve sensitivity and responsiveness on our behalf, then we get better behavioral outcomes. But one of the other things that's not on this slide is that the researchers for years now have known that if we improve sensitivity and responsiveness, the people that we're working with, that we're helping along the way here, they live up to higher expectations. So did everyone hear that? Not only do we get improved behavioral outcomes, but they live up to higher expectations. And right now, there's a likelihood you're not experiencing that. And we'll talk about that a little bit. First thing I would like to get to, and we're going to look at this in a different way than perhaps you've looked at this before. So this is very important. So one of the things that I want to do as we move this forward here is to talk about why I feel the way I do. Why is it I feel this way when I am confronted by negative action? And this is very important because remember, we're talking about this as a relationship between you and your child, you and your spouse or better half or partner, you and your colleagues, you and your students. It's part of a relationship. And so what we'll talk about today, actually, whether it's an adult you're working with or a child, or it's just a neurotypical person, not even a person with ADHD, all of this is relative to relationships, right? And how they perceive themselves and the outcomes that we get. So I want you to understand that we'll be talking about it in relationship to ADHD, children and adults. But the reality is this pertains to all of us, neurotypicals as well. So why is it we feel the way that we feel? You know, the brain, which has been the source of my study for the past 30 years, is an expert. The brain is an expert at pattern recognition. And we have done so for millions of years. The brain has evolved to be like this. So what I want to do is show you pattern recognition that we pick up right away. Let's go to the far left slide. I would like you to type in what you see in that far left slide where my cursor is. Can you type in very quickly what you see there? Excellent. Keep them coming. Interesting, because everyone says I see clouds, but everyone says, most everyone, about 99% of us say, I see a face, right? But some people say, I see a sad face. Some people say, I see someone with a frown. Someone said, I see a smile on the face. Someone said, I see a turban on the head. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we see a face there. I see it looks to me like Frankenstein, like the old Herman Munster, head, or a bouffant hairdo, right? And people say it's sad, and sometimes it does look sad. Sometimes but we do perceive this face, which is interesting, isn't it? Even though we know it's a cloud, we perceive a face there. Let's go to this next one. The one up here on the top right, the longer picture, the wider picture. How many people here see something there? What do you see there? Oh, wow. Okay, keep them coming. Excellent. Most of us, perfect. Most of us are saying, I see a face, but it's a spooky face. Does anyone there see kind of like one of those alien faces that you see in a Steven Spielberg movie? Right? Some people say it's ghost-like. So it's different than the one on the left, but we do see this pattern, and our brain starts imparting things right to it right away. And let's get this last one is the hardest one, right? This last one is the hardest one. This one on the bottom. Who sees anything there? Yeah, everyone sees a dog. Absolutely. Someone sees a turtle. That's interesting too. But I see a dog's face is what I'm getting from the most, right? Anthony says he sees a spaceship with one or two aliens sitting in it, which is good. It's an amazing thing what the brain does for us, isn't it? We are experts at pattern recognition, and that is from our ancestral days, from the evolution of millions of years. So the brain has evolved to do this, to be a pattern expert in recognition, right? Why? Why do we need that? Why is it that we would possibly have to have something like that? Because it has evolved with us over millions of years. It's part of being human. Well, our ancestors faced a lot of serious threats, right? I had to recognize a threat when I saw it. I had to recognize bad intentions, negative behaviors. If I didn't recognize the person walking up to me with a club as maybe having a negative intention, I may be killed. If I didn't recognize the fact that a saber-toothed tiger was dangerous and had certain characteristics, I would be in serious trouble. So those of our ancestors that did not have good pattern recognition, well, they were either killed or eaten. But the folks who had brains that were good at pattern recognition that could tell us to run when we needed to run, or hide when we needed to hide, or fight when we needed to fight, they survived. And that is the basis of the brain that we work with. Now that you know that, you kind of understand why you feel the way you do, right? When we get negative behaviors from our better half, right? Maybe a spouse, maybe just a partner. It may be we get it from our children, our colleagues at work, some of our students. When we get those negative behaviors, they leave lasting images on the brain. We feel irritated, disrespected, unjustly confronted, right? And sometimes if they're aggressive enough, I feel fearful, right? So this is incredibly important to understand, is that our brain recognizes those negative behaviors, and our ancestral part of that brain gives them a specific attribute. And so we start perceiving the other person who does this to us as a threat, as an annoyance, or anytime they approach me, I'm automatically irritated. Or they've disrespected me so much, I don't want to communicate with them, and my temper is really, I have a short fuse. All right. So let's try to make certain everyone here understands why this is happening. All right. So we understand that our ancestral part of our brain sees it like this, right? And as it sees these things, we feel these things as well. Right. Robert says it's a fundamental attribution error, right? And that is absolutely spot on. But the point is that we often don't recognize it because we're so involved in this, and we get so involved, we don't understand that this is occurring. And this is super, super important that we do understand this is what's occurring now. When we don't recognize it, right, it leads to confrontation. You can see the parents here are arguing, and you can see the child feels left out, right? Doesn't want to hear this, doesn't want to be part of it. And it may be over her. It may be that she started this. But the fact is, if we don't have the right responses, if we're responding with our ancestral brain, then we are considering this a fight, which leads to more consequences and all. I think when I show you a pattern here, you'll see it in just a moment. One of the acute things that we need to remember is that an ADHD person actually knows their place in the pecking order. They are acutely aware of the perceptions of those people around them, and they may be hypersensitive to those perceptions around them. I know that I'm different. These people treat me differently. Is everybody understanding? I receive a different treatment than other people. And it may be justified, it may not be justified, but I perceive myself as different. They perceive me as different. And then my self-esteem starts going lower because I understand what they expect of me and what they think I am. Then I live up or down to that level. They don't encourage me in higher expectations. They discourage me by making me perceive myself in a very negative light. How many people here can say, and be honest, that you have done this? Thank you. Yes, keep them coming. Yeah, that is a lot of us here. We understand that we are involved in this. And, but Well, and Maria has made a good point. How many people here also understand, if you're the ADHD person that's here, how many people, ADHD people here, understand this is you, that you are keenly aware, right? Not only of how you feel, right? And how you feel you are in the pecking order of things, but you also understand that they think you're different, and it affects your self-perception, your self-esteem. There are a lot of adults here and participants basically who do understand that. So again, it's a relationship. All right. Rhonda says empathy for children needs to be very strong, right? Kirsten said, yeah, as a child, I learned to mask this. Yeah, sorry, masking it. So let's talk about this cycle, because I would wager that the vast majority of people who are here are in this loop. Let's say that we have a negative action from an ADHD person, and I respond with my ancestral brain, an emotional negative response. Cut it out. I don't want to hear it. You just annoy me, right? Well, that leads them, right? You've lowered the expectation. That leads to more negative action back at you. You've decreased your perception of that person. When they approach you, you're expecting already pretty much negative behavior. And I don't expect anything good. Yeah, maybe, but maybe not. And I've actually had parents tell me, as shocking as this is, that they cannot stand their child. I can't stand it. He drives me crazy. I love him, but I can't stand him. Anyone here identify with this? Yeah. And maybe it may be you partially who's part of this, right? So what happens is, obviously we get decreased self-esteem, right? This is very, very important. And then we have more negative behaviors, right? Because there's decreased self-esteem on top of that. Less cooperation from them. Then they give us another negative response, and we know they're not going to live up to expectations here. So then it starts all over again. And this is a huge cycle. Can anyone here identify with being in this cycle right now? One way or the other, can you identify with it? Thank you. Yeah. This is what we need to break. And this is what we're talking about cultivating. We want to break this cycle, because if we keep responding with our ancestral brain, then obviously we're just going to get the same thing happening over and over again. So that's one of the points that we're going to make today on how we break this particular cycle. So we cultivate our personal sensitivity and responsiveness toward our ADHD children and adults. And we let them know we are here to make them be successful. Now, this echoes back to a slide I showed you just a little while ago in the early part of the webinar, that if we do cultivate our own personal sensitivity and responsiveness toward our child, our student, our spouse, our colleagues, our workers, our students, if we cultivate that sensitivity and proper responsiveness, it's not only going to help them do better, but they perceive it as directly affecting their success. It will also get them, those folks will reach up and live up to higher expectations. We can pose higher expectations, and they will live up to them. I cannot tell you how important this is. Out of everything we're learning today, if we understand this, then we know how to start to fix it. So in order to cultivate positive behaviors, we've got to understand the cause, right? It requires deep understanding in us about the cause. And we're going to hit each one of these. We will address each one of these in the upcoming slides. Right? We want to be a specialist in providing appropriate responses rather than our primitive negative response. Want to get away from that. We want to be able to set a structure for success. And then we want to be the chief who encourages reflection, right? We encourage this not only in our ADHD child or spouse or partner. We want to encourage it not only in them, but in ourselves. So, because that's part, remember, we're not talking about just doing these little tricks that I know you probably attended a webinar where they're just giving you basic tips and strategies. This is what you do, and here's what you're supposed to get. And you probably have tried them. But if you don't understand the root cause, then all the tips and strategies you get are not going to work for very long. You'll fall right back in to that cycle I showed you just a moment ago. Has anyone here, can anyone here identify with that? That you've seen and you've read all those tips and strategies and you tried them and they worked for a little while and then you went right back to where you were. Yeah, so many. Kirsten said so many strategies. Absolutely. There are so many. But if we don't get to the root, and again, there's the cultivating theme, we get to the root of the problem, then we can actually make significant change. So let's get to the root, the cause, right? Understanding the cause. Are they just trying to be obstinate, right? Argumentative, headstrong? Or is it another problem? Is the cause weak executive function? I'm going to put everyone on pause for just a second and make certain my internet connection is good. Okay, I hope that we have some people saying that I am a little glitchy, and I hope that means my internet connection is glitchy and not me personally. But I hope that I resolve that here. We'll see in just a moment. All right. Boy, Tim, you're dating yourself and me when we talk about max headroom. I like that though. Okay. We want to talk about executive function. Your brain as a corporation. All right. So there is an analogy that we're going to use about executive function and the way the brain operates. Right. Your brain as a corporation is an interesting topic here. In a corporation, the executives make the decisions. They are the arbiters of what goes on. As President Bush would have said, the decider, right? They also plan and organize functions throughout the corporation. And in the brain, those same functions are really known as executive functions, just as if your brain were a corporation. They're mental processes that help us reason, make good decisions. They help us organize and plan, right, for strategy. They help us focus our attention. They help us remember instructions, and they help us juggle multiple tasks successfully. Now, beware that in ADHD people, executive function deficits are part of the hallmark of ADHD. With ADHD is closely tied weak executive functioning. So our ability to reason is a little bit diminished. All right. Our reasoning, our ability to control our emotional selves, our emotional regulation is limited. I don't reason well because I respond emotionally. I start yelling instead of reasoning. Right? My ability to organize is not as good if I have ADHD generally. Right? I don't have good planning. Obviously, attention is an issue. If you give me multiple step instructions, like go to your bedroom, put your pajamas on, brush your teeth, and get ready for bed, you may find me in my bedroom an hour later, but I've done nothing other than make it to the bedroom. And then ask me to do multiple tasks. I might be able to do 40 tasks at once, but I won't finish any of them if I have ADHD, because truly having it, means weak executive function. It's almost synonymous. Does everyone here identify with these at this point? Does everyone here identify with executive function and having weak executive function? So good, perfect. So when you realize this is happening, right, it's not because they are trying to annoy you. They are not trying to intimidate you. They're not trying to just, how can we say this nicely? We'll just say they're not really trying to ignore you or hurt your feelings, but that happens for various reasons. And we'll discuss that a little bit as we go on. All right. So we have to understand, the moment we understand that, we can start to create a sensitivity on how to respond. They are not trying to terrify me. They're not trying to intentionally irritate me, as we noted before. I don't have to be fearful of them. I just have to understand what's going on so I can help them make changes. This slide is incredibly important. No one is born with strong executive function, right? It would be a heck of a thing to see a 6-month-old with strong executive function. Doesn't happen, does it? It is not innate. We learn them. Now with ADHD, it's more difficult to have those attributes, to have strong executive function. It's tougher for us to learn it. Can we? Absolutely. Absolutely. The brain is an incredible thing. Just as we have learned to make the responses we make today with our ancestral brain, we can reprogram that. That's why you're here. So we're actually talking about a relationship in which we reprogram how we respond and how they will respond to our response. Remember, no one is born with strong executive function, but we can learn it. It is highly correlated to success and happiness. So it's not just Peter saying, you need strong executive function so that you don't have fights, so that life is easier. This research over the last, 50 years or so has shown that if we have stronger executive function, we have a higher correlation to success in our lives and to happiness. And this has been done, the research has been done at major universities over a long period of time. So there is a lot of validity to what this actually says. There's an immense amount of validity to what I am telling you from research. That we can improve our working memory, which is part of executive function. And that means that we can manipulate data, plan, and strategize. If I have strong executive function, I have inhibitory control. In other words, I won't blurt something out in class. I may not say something to my wife that I would regret saying. And if you have a spouse that is ADHD, they have probably said things to you, and then they go, oh my gosh, I don't know why I ever said that. Or sometimes they don't even catch it. If you've noticed that, raise your hand, that they will say things to you that are just so discouraging and disheartening. And how do I take that? How can you possibly, my primitive brain goes, how could you possibly say that to me? Right? Now, I hope you start to understand why that happens. It's not that they don't love you. It's because the filter that helps inhibit those things blurting out is not as active. Now, that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it more comfortable for me, but understanding the root helps us build a solution. Task completion, right? I may start 50 tasks, but finish none. Task initiation, I may start them, but finish none. And I may have trouble even starting it. I may be one of those procrastinators. I have very little self-monitoring. The only self-monitoring I have that I'm deeply sensitive to is how badly people think I behave, how negative people perceive me. But I don't really have the ability to self-monitor to change that. And that's, again, weak executive function. Mental flexibility, the ability to adapt and change. Very tough for ADHD people. If you change their routine, take them out of a routine as a child, you may get entire meltdowns. How many people have experienced that before? You try to do something new, thought it would be fun, and it just blew up on you. Right. So now you know that this is just, it's not something that is within their control necessarily right now. Right. And emotional regulation, right? Emotional regulation, when we blow up, it's unusual, that we have a blow up typically for an adult. But for an ADHD person, it can just be so overwhelming, so fast, and I don't have emotional regulation. And then there's another meltdown. And of course, when you experience that, how do you talk to them? Because they're in a meltdown phase. So again, this is part of the relationship we have to build to start to change this. Right? This is strong executive function compared to weak executive function. Weak executive function creates very high stress levels. And you may find this in students that you're working with, or your child, or even your better half, all right, your other half. They may have much higher stress levels. They have greater anxiety, and they just are not happy. Many of you may have found, and I found this in the populations I have been friends with and I have worked with for the past 30 years. They not only have a general dissatisfaction with life, they will start to self-medicate. They will take illicit drugs, they will take prescription drugs to try to medicate their way out of it. Anyone here seen that? Yeah, a lot of us have. Absolutely. And the problem is that often ends up very unhappily. I have had 2 or 3 friends die from trying to do this. So I am incredibly passionate about talking to you about doing this and how we can make these changes together. All right, because it's a serious issue. So what we've come to after we've learned all of this is that developing executive function is cultivating positive behaviors. And this is a relationship. It's not just them, it's me and how I respond to negative action. And when I have a proper response, I get a better behavior, a more positive behavior. And then remember, if I'm sensitive to that and they know that I'm helping them and my goal is to help them, they live up to higher expectations. Super important. So here you can see that mom is responding in the way, the primitive brain wants her to, her ancestral brain. He's caused a problem and she is yelling. I have had it. You do this all the time. You drive me crazy. Has anyone here ever caught yourself doing that with your children, especially an ADHD child? Yeah. I mean, and it's not because they are aware of it or could control it, because they can't. They have a very difficult time doing that right now. As a matter of fact, I had this one student that drove the parents crazy because he was getting up at night and going out for a drink of water. He'd have to walk through the living room. He would smash his shin on the coffee table every single time on the coffee table. And it didn't matter if he did it the night before, he'd do it again the next night. And I'm like, how can this possibly be? He just does this over and over again. Well, it's just that the wiring isn't there to make that change, right? He doesn't have the awareness of his environment. And it was just one of those things that they could not understand. And it's like this parent here. How could you possibly keep doing this after I've told you a million times not to keep doing it, yet you still do it? And so I'm fed up. I'm irritated and I am coming back with a primitive brain. And that doesn't work for us, does it? And to be like Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? Well, it doesn't work, right? It can also lead, weak executive function may lead to unintentional behaviors. And I discussed this briefly before. If you have an ADHD spouse or partner, boyfriend or girlfriend, if there is someone significant to you that has this, and all of a sudden they spout out something to you that makes you think that no person that loved me could possibly say that to me. And then I have a difficult time coping with it. Remember, the filter that prevents us from saying something like that is active when I have good executive function. When I have weak executive function, the brakes, the filter to stop that, it's not there. It's very low. And so those things pop out. And students often do it in school. And they may not mean to be negative in school. Sometimes they'll just blurt out an answer without raising their hand. And everybody else in the class is like, well, I have to raise my hand, So you see this over and over again. So what if we're able to respond or react in a different way? What if I took a few seconds when I experienced the negative behavior and I go, you know what? Peter said, take a few moments and reflect on this, right? Let me step away for a moment. And I come back to it. Now we get to address it differently, right? And this is a great slide because this young man has just done something. The parent walks away and I come back. We have a gentle heart-to-heart redirection. All right. We don't want to wait a long time, just enough to where I've cooled down. So I am not going to use my ancestral brain and emotionally yell, because I'm that type of person. I studied martial arts for over 50 years. I have a 7th degree black belt. And, all I was taught was how to respond to aggressive, negative action. And so I was very explosive. At this point in my life, I've had to change that. I can't always be explosive, right? So we have to use a different part of our brain to set up a chance for change. Now, when I start talking about this, I would say to my student, now, John, this is what I see just happened. What do you see? And I ask about what just happened. So it's making him reflect a little bit on what he's done. And I'll go into that in more detail in just a moment. But it's very important to be able to sit and have them reflect with you and then think of other options. And one of the most important things, and I want to discuss this one, and that's why I switched to this one really quickly, is that you want to catch your child being good. So right now, how many people think that when you deal with your ADHD child, you catch them being bad more times than you ever catch them being good? I catch them misbehaving, doing something that's just off the wall, not completing this, not obeying the rules, not finishing homework, arguing with me. Yeah, that's kind of common, isn't it? But what is it? What happens when we make it our goal to make them successful? And I go, you know what? I'm going to catch him being good. Every chance I get, I want to. And Robert says, you know what? That's my goal for the people I supervise. I catch them doing good. I think that's a brilliant way to live. Because if you can support them when they are good, we redirect them when they're not doing good. If they're not behaving well, redirect them. But if we catch them being good and we reinforce that by telling them that they're being good, I really appreciate that you did that for me. That was wonderful. I remember getting my first job. Many of you will remember a store called the A&P. I worked at an A&P supermarket. It's a chain throughout America. If many of you are much younger, you may not know them at all because I believe they only have a couple of stores in the United States anymore. And we had one manager, Johnny, and his assistant manager, Charlie. Johnny would tell you to do something and would yell at you to do it and make you feel like an idiot. Charlie's way to do it he'd say, Peter, I really need this floors mop tonight. Would you take that over for me? And could you get that done here and get started on it right away? And I would say, yeah, Charlie, I'm on it. I'll do it. And do you notice the way he said that to me? He's a brilliant old country boy from North Carolina. Charlie'd say, hey, Peter, would you do that for me? I really need your help to get that done. And I just felt like, yeah, I'll help you, Charlie. I'll do it. As a 16-year-old, I jumped on. Now, when Johnny would yell at me and make me feel like I was an idiot, did I want to do that? Absolutely not. He made me feel like an idiot. He lowered my self-image to me, and obviously he felt I was an idiot. So why would I work up to what he wanted? I would do it, but I really didn't want to do it for Johnny. I would do it with extra happiness, and I do a great job for Charlie. These are some of the things that we can learn and catch people being good at and then reinforce it. All right. Oh, Sheila says, my mom would collect the green stamps. Oh my God. Oh, mom got her brand new. I can't remember. I couldn't read the last of that, but I was right there with you. Yeah. My mom was a green stamp collector. I tried to get as many of those as I could to get great things, what I thought were great things from the green stamp store. I'm glad that there are some people here that are old enough to remember those things. They're long lost at this point. One of the other things we can talk about is setting structure. And if this is so hard, it has been so hard. So I want to just make certain we understand. I know that all of us want to set structure. We try to, but it's very, very difficult, especially when we're confronted by a pandemic, working from home, trying to be a parent at home and working from home, and the big changes we have undergone in the last 2 years. It's hard. But when you look at the research and you review 50 years of research on family routines, you see that statement? All children, no matter their age, are better able to regulate their behavior when families follow a predictable routine. So it doesn't have to be an enormous routine. It just has to be a routine that you can follow. All right. It is necessary. The brain really responds best when things are in order. The brain is an instrument of creating order. Let me talk about that for just a moment. The brain, one of the primary purposes of our brain is to create order in our world. And when we look at pattern recognition, well, the brain is trying to make sense out of what it sees and refer it back to what we know. So it's trying to create order. That's one of its primary jobs. Setting structure is creating order because the brain works best when there is order in our lives, because its primary job is to create order. I'm pausing here because I want you to absorb that. When you go to sleep at night, your brain doesn't shut down. Your brain is working as hard, if not harder, than when you're awake. It is creating memories and making order out of what you saw during the day. And that is why we have dreams, because the brain is working to create order. And our dreams may be crazy at times. They seem like total chaos. They may tire us out, but the brain is struggling to create order. So setting structure, I cannot emphasize how important it is to have a structure, especially when you're dealing with children. Now, as an adult, if you have an adult ADHD in the house, still especially important to have. Teresa says, when my grandson came to live with me 3 years ago at age 14, he was traumatized, and it's taken 3 years. And I guarantee you, she has to create order to do that. And I'm really glad you mentioned that, because when they come from chaos, and you create structure, lives change. You will change lives doing this. So I cannot overemphasize how important this is. Thank you for everyone who's contributing as we go through these slides. Very Well Mind. This is a great website, by the way, called verywellmind.com. And they outline the benefits of structure. It provides external control. In other words, let's say that I have an ADHD son, like this fellow does here. When I am structuring this, I wouldn't just hand him a knife and tell him to have at it. I can stand over with structure. I can stand over and I can guide him. And just this touch, the ability to touch, like he's doing right now, and guide, supremely important for the way that his son's brain develops. His son will perceive this as positive interaction, and that dad's helping me. Dad's working for my best interest. That increases my self-worth. That increases my self-esteem. And so structure is all part and parcel of everything we've talked about before. It also creates fewer conflicts. When you set a structure and you adhere to it, you commonly get far fewer conflicts. It builds skills and habits because we're teaching our children, our students, our colleagues, how things are supposed to start, how we are going to work with them, and how we're going to finish them. So we build these strong sets of skills that help them organize and plan and develop really good habits. And it just doesn't apply to ADHD kids and adults. This applies to my whole family. Now, I know it's difficult, and it has been increasingly monumentous. It's enormous. The amount, I just can't, I can't think of all the adjectives that would talk about the last couple of years. And Angela actually has a really good question here. She said, but what if the parent and ADHD child have struggled because of time management? So that is an entirely different webinar in which we will talk about how you two can work together to do this. And maybe we should do that next time as well. We can actually talk about how you can do that. But I think, one of the first things that you can do is come to an agreement. Even if you are ADHD yourself and your child is, you can come to an agreement that you will structure, and you develop a mutual contract about what the structure will look like. You agree to it, you post it on the refrigerator, you adhere to it. And someone just popped up, I couldn't see who it was, and said, use some timers. Timers are good to do, good tools to use. Absolutely. So there are ways to do that. But remember that any outside tools are not going to be incredibly efficient unless we deal with what? That would be unless we deal with executive function. And that's kind of mission critical at this point, is that we have to learn how to deal with executive function, because remember today's webinar is about cultivation, right? So we want to talk about how to cultivate it. This is something else that you can do, whether you're ADHD and your child is. Again, we take time to reflect. What I want my ADHD child or adult that I live with to do is reflect on how their behavior affects other people. Because many times they're unaware of it entirely. When I was teaching, I would often see an ADHD child we'd have a line going to the water fountain, and they would break in front of people and push them out of the way. Now, they did not know how that affected the other people, didn't care, didn't know. It wasn't part of the way their brain managed them. So I would calmly take them off the water fountain and say, this is what we're going to do. You'll wait in line until it's time. We'll do our best not to push people out of the way. It's just not acceptable. I didn't yell. All right. I didn't say, why did you just do that? I would explain to them what happened. And then I'd say, Now, what do you think just happened when you pushed him out of the way? Well, how did that make him feel? And they would have to reflect on that. And after a while, they picked it up, but this was not even in their mind. And again, this is due to weak executive function. How to reflect and bad behaviors occur, right? How to reflect when bad behaviors occur. So you want right after they do it, just as I mentioned at the water fountain, I want to have that discussion right after the behavior occurred. I don't want to wait for a long period because they won't remember what they did and they'll think you're just picking on them. So you want to make it as soon as possible after the negative behavior occurs. All right. I'll say, what was that behavior? Well, I shoved him out of the way. How did that behavior affect him? Well, I saw he hit his mouth on the metal water fountain as I pushed him off, and it probably hurt him. I said, it definitely hurt him. And I would bring the other student over. We'd talk about that. Inquire how behavior made them feel afterwards. Many times when I'd ask him this, they'd say, I don't know. I didn't look. I didn't see them. I don't know. I got a drink. And then ask them if that behavior was the appropriate response at that point. And most all the time, 99% of the time, they would tell me, no, I shouldn't have done it. I don't know why I did it. All right. Then what do we do differently? Well, next time I'll wait in line. So they're learning a skill at this point. I'm learning to wait in line. But it doesn't mean that they have that skill, they're born with it. It means if they're not doing it, they have to learn it. And there has to be consequences if they don't. All right. If it was a negative behavior, should they apologize? And oftentimes I would encourage the apology, because if someone dinged their face because of the push out of the water fountain, I would encourage them to apologize. But I think getting them to understand what this means to the other person is probably one of the most important aspects of this. Is there anything else they can do now to correct this situation? That's always great to ask them. If the behavior was positive, there we go. Catch them being good. And then make certain I reinforce it. Hey, you know what? You saw that he was really thirsty and you let him go in front of you in line. That was really nice because he was really hot and thirsty. He was right behind you and you let him go first. That was really kind of you. All right. Again, just ways to catch them being good and then ways to reflect, right? Ways to reflect. Now, it isn't just for children. When you are dealing with another ADHD person in your family, especially if it's your significant other, reflection is important for both of you to do. You can sit and have a calm chat, but remember not to go into this with the ancestral mind. You just annoy me so much. How could you possibly say that to me? Wrong way to start it. Again, reflect on what just happened. I would look at my partner and say, you just called me an idiot and various other hateful things. How can you love me if that is the way you feel? Can you tell me why you said that? Well, I'm upset. I don't know why it just popped out, and I'm sorry. That popped out. I'm sorry. Well, again, I can't respond with an ancestral mind. I can't say, well, that was stupid of you to do, and now I've had it with you. Then everything just starts to break down at that point. So the reflection has to follow, and I'm going to go back to that slide, right? Soon after the behavior, we have a calm discussion. What was the behavior? How behavior affected others? Now, if you want copies of these slides, I believe we can get them, or this is actually being recorded right now. So we'll post this recording so that you can have this, so you have the concept here of reflection, because it's a really good method, especially when they note that you're sensitive, you're helping them. Remember, helping them and being sensitive elicits them to achieve higher expectations. If we just yell and we keep the negative up, then it lowers their ability to to sustain higher expectations. They just won't. All right. Okay. So, and again, remember, this is recorded. We'll send you a link to the recording so you can see it as well. So developing executive function is cultivating positive behaviors. This is really key. The root, because remember cultivation, the key today was cultivation, getting to the root of the problem, right? And the root here is a double entendre. We're talking about cultivation, so we talk about roots, but the root of the problem here is that we have weak executive function, and we have to be able to be sensitive enough to help them cultivate those positive behaviors. And obviously we have to increase executive function. And this is what I did in play attention. So I'm going to just deviate here for a second. I integrated neurofeedback technology, and it was inspired by NASA. I integrated that with cognitive skill training and behavior shaping. The cognitive skill training is developed so that we can increase executive function, because I knew it was a problem. From years of teaching, I knew that this problem existed, and the only way to get at it was to get to the root, which was developing those executive functions. So I gave them ways in which we could practice each one of those executive functions, whether it was social cues and understanding social cues, that mean look that says you better cut it out. So I understood what that meant. My ADHD students understand what that meant. To learning to pay better attention, planning, working memory, short-term memory, all of that. So we have to understand that, this was my passion, and this is one of the reasons I developed this, to learn executive function. All of the cognitive exercises in Play Attention are brain enabled. In other words, we have technology, an armband that lets you control the activities by your brain alone in many cases, kind of like you're Luke Skywalker or Harry Potter. You are controlling things through our armband interface that you saw here just a moment ago, that allows you to control the games by your mind alone. They're brain enabled. So it puts your brain right to work learning strong executive functions. All right. All of the skills, notice everything from attention to visual tracking, time on task, auditory processing, so I can learn to take multiple step directions, social skills, motor skills, spatial memory, working memory, discriminatory processing. Everything is included in there so that we actually develop that. I know there's been a tremendous amount in here for you to absorb today. And we will send you the video so that you can review it. But I did want you to know that, this is why I actually developed Play Attention years ago, because I had to think of a way in which I could train my students' executive functions in a short amount of time that I had with them at school. And I created Play Attention so that we actually did have a tool to do that. And this is all related. Remember, today it was cultivating positive behaviors. But remember, if we don't fix executive function, we can have all of the tips and strategies, right, that we want. But unless we get to the root cause and try to mend executive function and get them to have greater executive function, then the tips and strategies will generally not work very well and won't last very long. We definitely need to be sensitive so that we can make certain we are working to change their life and lead them to higher expectations. So while I'm wrapping up here, if you want to learn about how we do that in Play Attention, you can schedule a consultation. Just write in consultation, and then someone will email you so that you can it's free, talk to an expert about it and what we do at Play Attention. If you want to learn more about executive function and attentional control, do you want to learn where you are or where your child is along that scale, along that spectrum of executive function and attentional control? You can register for the brief or the focus assessments. They're easy to do from your home. All right. So if you would like those, yes, Play Attention, by the way, is available in Canada as well. Rita says, I have an appointment with Amber tomorrow to get started. Excellent. Excellent. If you want to do the brief or the focus assessments to figure out where you are, just write in assessments. Someone will contact you via email about that as well. Make certain you type these in so that someone can contact you. Register for our next webinar on cultivating time management. Type in webinar. You'll be alerted when that next webinar comes out next week, I think. And you'll be able to come to that one as well. So again, one more time, if you want to talk about play attention, learn how to improve your executive function, type in consultation. If you want an assessment to find out where you are or where your student is, where your child is, where your spouse is, type in assessment. If you want to come to the webinar, type in webinar. But thank you so much. It's been a joy, and I look forward to working with you in the very near future. Take care.